What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 3 and Out YouTube page. I'm John Middlekauff, and we are talking football all day, every day. Make sure you subscribe, like the video, share it with your friends. Let's roll, baby. What is up, everybody? Well, I'll tell you who's up. Kirk Cousins, Cole's Cash, leads the Atlanta Falcons back to a crazy win. I mean, that was the Eagles now, I would say 2 of the last 5 Monday night games when we go back to last season. That game with Drew Lock late in the season was kind of a holy shit, your mouth drops on the floor. That was probably a little crazier than the night because it was Drew Lock, but tonight was pretty wild. The game was flying by. I was eating dinner with 4 or 5 minutes left. You thought they were going to get a couple first downs. No problem. They'll get it back with, at most, less than a minute and no chance. And then everything changed. We'll dive into, Cousins had his moment. That's a devastating loss for Sirianni. It really is. They showed the graphic that he was 0-3 last year in games leading with 2 minutes left to go in similar situations like that. Now I'm screwing up the stat, but they showed it on the Monday night game. And that is a kick in the pants. And late in the game, they showed a visual when they were still on offense before they had to kick the field goal and kick it back to Falcons with Howie standing right behind Sirianni. I've been in that office after some rough losses, especially on Monday Night Football, East Coast. These guys aren't getting back till midnight. That's a devastating L. That's the worst L so far this season. I mean, we have seen uglier L's, right? The Panthers, the Cowboys on Sunday. That is the craziest L. It's short season so far. We'll have many more, but that was insane, especially on a night with Jalen. But we will dive into it all. Also hand out some game balls. We had some pretty sweet moments from the weekend. We got to do a little hot seat, and we'll call it is getting hot in here from my man Nelly, because there are a couple guys. I think the Flames, maybe not on their chair, but they're in the room. They're in the room, and I don't see an extinguisher close to them. So we'll dive into some of that. But before we dive into football, I got to tell you about my friends, my partners in the official ticketing app of this podcast. They go by Gametime. Here's the thing with Gametime. They're the best. I've used all the ticketing apps. I've been using Gametime now for 2 years. It doesn't get any better. It doesn't get any easier to use. The ability to get flash deals, the ability to search by venue, team, concerts, comedy shows, obviously sporting events, college or pro. Been to many games with the link. Highly recommend it. Great atmosphere. Unless they lose like tonight and you got to leave the stadium, then it's a little sketchy. But all these games look like so much fun. If you want to get to a college game, a pro game, I got you covered. So you guys know the drill. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code JOHN for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code JOHN for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. You know what? I want to start with a positive note. And this is why you can't, in a live event that is the ultimate reality show, I had sculpted some takes, and they were going to be negative surrounding Kirk Cousins. His red zone performances were absolutely atrocious. I got some texts from former NFL players that were like, what is he doing? Balls are flying all over the place, not even remotely close. I have a take that I'm not going to change, but it would have been much better if he just would have imploded at the end. He does look funny in a Falcons uniform. I don't think that's going to change as the season goes on, regardless how much success they have. He looks funny in the uniform. But beside the one drive, which they scored to Mooney, where he had 3 great passes in a row. On 3rd down, he hit Pitts. On 4th down, he hit Ray over the middle. Then he hit the big touchdown drive. I thought he was not good. I thought, they're playing the Chiefs next week. This Penix talk is only going to grow. And we'll get into Sirianni and Kellen Moore's decision at the end of the game, which gave Cousins an extra 40 seconds because they didn't have any timeouts. But that drive, now, Vic Fangio might be the highest paid defensive coordinator in the league. He makes $5 million a year. And I listen, he knows more defense than most of us will ever know combined. But playing that soft when they clearly have good skill guys, and Cousins, despite having I would say, a average game at best, can make basic out routes when guys are wide open, in just open areas and in wide open green grass. The other thing is they weren't getting a pass rush all night long. We'll dive into that with the Eagles. Their defensive pass rush is non-existent. Like it just doesn't get home. So Cousins marches them down the field. In 3 shots, it's like they're already in the red zone. It was insane how fast they moved the ball down the field. But all you're thinking in the back of your head when the drive started, this is a guy who is historically poor on primetime games. And that has to be one of the greatest moments of his career. Because let's face it, the moment they kicked off, I'm not alone. And I would imagine a lot of Atlanta Falcons were like this, and everyone else that's not an Eagles fan, or even if you are an Eagles fan, thought there's no chance on God's green earth this guy leads a touchdown drive right now. I would have guessed that they turned it over on downs around the 50-yard line. Yet within 3 or 4 passes, it's like, well, they're already in the red zone. And the one thing the Falcons do have is like tall wide receivers. And then Drake London turns Darius Slay like a dreidel, easy touchdown in the corner of the end zone. The moment that happened, you started thinking, well, the Eagles still have a couple timeouts. And then a couple plays later, Jalen throws the pick. And the Atlanta Falcons win the game. But Cousins, in one drive tonight, changed an early narrative on his season. Because I think it was getting bad. He did not look like the guy that I think they felt confident that they were getting. He obviously doesn't move. He's never been able to move. But to me, the visual of him in the uniform, the cohesion of the offense, how poor they've been in the red zone, I think they are, I guess that final touchdown was a red zone touchdown, but before that, they were 1 for 4, and it was the Pitts touchdown against the Steelers. And then you have a moment like that, and you go, there is life there. Because they do have skill guys. The Falcons' defense is pretty good. Judon's a big addition. Bates is a really good player. Belichick hates A.J. Terrell because he hasn't got an interception in over 1,000 days, and he got paid a lot of money. But he is a solid corner. Like, their defense is good. And that was a must-win because this Sunday they host the Chiefs, and I'm thinking they're about to fall to 0-2. You got the Bucs and the Saints who feel poised to be like 5-2 in a couple weeks. All of a sudden, you're digging yourself out of a hole at 0-3. How do you even get back to 3-3? And Cousins changed everything. And you saw the excitement on the sideline from the owner who cut this guy a $100 million check. And I don't blame him because that was a massive moment. And he needed it because the snowball of negativity can start coming down the mountain and it doesn't stop. We see it happen with other players, especially when you give a guy a lot of money. He has no sweat equity with your team, with your fan base, and he earned a lot tonight. That was, I don't think I'm being hyperbolic, one of the biggest moments of Kirk Cousins' career. And it was cool. I mean, it was fun to watch. He seems like he is a great high character guy. He's an easy guy to root for after that quarterback documentary a couple years ago on Netflix. And as someone who was kind of out on him midway through this game, changed it just like that. Because the whole point of this whole thing is to win. And he found a way to get his team a W in the biggest moment possible. And on the flip side, that's a devastating loss for the Eagles. I mean, I don't think it gets much worse. That's on the level of the Seattle loss last night or last year on Monday Night Football. And I would say the big difference, I think it's almost worse at home in front of your fans, especially they were vibing all night. But there are 2 things that really stood out to me. Obviously, the end of the game. Like, I don't put the defense situation and the play calls on Sirianni because ultimately they're paying Vic Fangio $5 million. Sirianni has nothing to do with that. Vic Fangio, that's atrocious. That has to be better. You can't call the soft coverages when your defensive line has been horrendous. They've paid Huff a lot of money. He's nowhere to be found. The pressure from their front four is basically non-existent these last couple weeks when they've invested in high draft picks and paid a lot of money. So Fangio's not a blitzer. Well, if you're just sitting back, that was a pretty risky proposition and it backfired in your face. But before that, Sirianni's not the offensive coordinator either, but he is the boss. And on that situation on third down, when they have no timeouts left, I understand Saquon is a fantastic player. He looks incredible for the Eagles. I don't think you take the risk. Jalen hits him in the hands. Saquon catches that 98 times out of 100. The problem is in that situation, when it is one of the two times that he drops it, it screws you and it screws you hard. Because the Falcons ended up getting the ball back with 139. And that's the difference of under 60 seconds. And I also think there is a psychological effect when you're on offense, knowing you have less than a minute and no timeouts, and you have to go 70 yards. There was less of an urgency once they hit two plays because they had so much time. Like, time is on your side when you're close to the 2-minute mark. If you hit a 15-yard chunk play, you can take a deep breath, especially now where they start you at the 30-yard line. So I think you hit a 10-yard play, boom, you're at the 40. It used to be you would be at the 20, and if you hit a 10-yard play, you'd only be at the 30. You still got a long way to go. But you're already at the 40. You're a play away from already flipping the other side of the field. And I just think Sirianni, under no circumstances, can be on the headset and go, Kellen, call a run here. And I understand the Eagles are probably the most progressive organization in being aggressive. Now, there are a lot of other teams that are like that as well, but they've been on the forefront of aggressive nature. And we saw it in the first quarter when they were at the 9-yard line. It's 0-0. So I'm all for, in the middle of a game, in the second half, going forward on fourth down situations. You have absolutely no clue how this game is going to play out. And it turned out it was an extremely low-scoring game. And those 3 points would have been very valuable to your cause. And he went for it, and they didn't get it. And that was something in the back of my mind throughout the game, like, what are we doing? It is 0-0. I understand if you're down 12 points in the second half, like, we need a touchdown. Okay, totally get you. But in that situation, with all the unknown, analytical people love to say, that's why you go for it, to give yourself a percentage chance to win. You cannot say that in the first quarter with 10 minutes left to go and basically an entire game. I'm sorry, I can't get behind that. And I'm pro-aggression in football, in life, in every aspect of society, basically. That is stupidity. The thing I get having a conversation, hey, we like this play to Saquon in the flat. It's been open throughout the game. It'll be stealing candy from a baby first down ball game. Kellen, I understand. I like the play too. But it's week 2. We got them by the throats. Run it. They have no timeouts. And make them go 70 yards on us in 55 seconds. I don't believe Cousins can do that. It's dramatically different at $140. And it clearly bit him in the ass. Hell, they ended up scoring so fast that the Eagles got the ball back with, around 30 seconds, which is sad because Jalen was awesome tonight. And I think you saw the Jalen that was competing to be the MVP 2 years ago. He was accurate. He was great throwing on the move. And when he runs, he turns into the power Lamar Jackson. The running disappeared last year. So for as shitty as this loss is, if you're an Eagles fan, the one bright spot is if he can play like that, we're going to beat a lot of teams. The Falcons are good. They have a lot of talent. I don't know, meaning good, what their record's going to be, but they do have a lot of good players on their team. And their defense is playing really well. And Jalen was dominating him. Because as a runner, he's not Lamar in terms of the speed. He actually turns into much more like a running back. Slow, steady, picking holes, can break guys off. And here's what he can do. Nobody in the league wants to slide anymore. Nobody. Tua's running into guys, concussed. Who knows when he'll be back. Jaden Daniels tries to run over everybody. Anthony Richardson. It's like, guys, slide. He can pick his poison because he knows when I can run over a certain guy. but he also can slide no problem. He is an elite runner of the football. And we know he's a great deep ball thrower. When he combines those two, he's a high-end player, and he's worth every penny. Like, that was winning football tonight from Jalen. I know he throws the pick at the end. They're kind of in a tough spot. Maybe we could argue don't throw the ball, which would be fair. But I thought subtract that play, which they were already in major trouble the moment Cousins scored. Now, you could argue, like, why are we even taking shots? We still have a timeout, which is fair. But I thought beside that play, he was excellent. And I do think big picture, like, the Eagles have an issue with their defensive line. If it's going to be average to below, like, they're just not going to be good on defense. They simply are not. And I understand their high-end first-round pick that got spun around on the play. They're paying Slay a lot of money. He gives up a touchdown. There's, CJ had a fantastic tackle on that short yardage, fourth down. I mean, it was elite. It looked like Brian Dawkins in his prime. But their defensive line, to me, is just not living up to the billing. So, bright note, Cousins, awesome. I mean, what a moment for him. Jalen was awesome. But Sirianni, Fangio, that's one, the coaching staff. Like, Fangio, what are you doing on the last drive? Sirianni, how are you okaying that third down pass? It just, unless sometimes in life, you got to pump the brakes and be a little more conservative in certain situations. I'm all for putting your chips in the middle of the table. I don't think that's playing Monday morning quarterback. That was stupid and just too risky. Like, the risk reward there, if he drops it, it's just too, I mean, it's crippling. And it was, and you could feel it right away. Turned out it bit him in the ass. Touchdowns, TD, Huddy, taking it to the house, in for 6. I like to call it a tug. Whatever you call touchdown, one thing's for sure. Touchdowns matter more at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. On the ground, in the air, special teams or defense, we do not care how you score them. We just want to bet touchdowns. And DraftKings Sportsbook is the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Ready to place your first NFL bet? Try betting on something simple like a player to score a touchdown. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your bet today. Ready to do a touchdown dance of your own? I know I do it all the time. New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $250 in bonus bets instantly and get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use the code JOHN. That's code JOHN for new customers to get $250 in bonus bets when you bet just $5 and get 1 month NFL Plus Premium. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Let's give out some game balls. And these are the type that if you're a fan of this team, if you saw the guy at a bar, you'd buy him a round of drinks. Like, I owe you one. That was awesome. Whether it be a coach or a player. And I shorted the Packers this week. I said, under no circumstances can they win a game with Malik Willis. Now, it turned out Malik Willis is on the Indianapolis Colts right now. Anthony Richardson, who is playing at a really, really low level. And the Indianapolis Colts defense is not good. But Matt LaFleur might have had his Picasso moment. That was, and he's had some great moments, right? Won a lot of games with Rodgers, won a couple MVPs, created Jordan Love. But to get Malik Willis after the 53-man cutdown and be forced to start him week 2 and absolutely kick the crap out of the Colts was really, really impressive. He went 12 of 14, didn't have to do much, threw a touchdown, but they ran for 260 yards. 260 yards. If you're playing Malik Willis and you're the Colts, I would say the only thing that is going to give them a chance to win if they dominate us on the ground. And 260 yards is not domination. That is like the best rushing performance of the year. Like, how many teams throughout the season are going to run for over 250 yards? Absolute clinic by LaFleur. So, game ball, cocktails. Cheers to Matty L. Alvin Kamara, who I think a lot of people thought was somewhat, I don't want to say washed, but the best football of his career is behind him. And here's the thing. When you get in the Shanahan offense, and you're a good running back, but you can catch the ball, they will feature you. And Alvin Kamara ran for 115 yards and 3 touchdowns, caught 2 passes, had like a 58-yard screen pass to the hizzy, another touchdown. He had 4 touchdowns yesterday. Absolute clinic by Kamara. Game ball. Pat Jones. Who? Pat Jones of the Minnesota Vikings. I got to be fully transparent here. Didn't know much about this guy. Honestly, didn't. They drafted him in the 3rd round in 2021. I think he has been a backup because they've had, good defensive linemen over the years in Hunter and Za'Darius. But yesterday, Pat Jones had 2 sacks and 4 tackles. He was lining up against Trent Williams. This guy was always in Brock Purdy's lap. He was excellent. I mean, this guy, I don't know if he can keep this up all season long, but yesterday, that guy was giving Trent Williams fits. He's long. He's got a little spin move. He's got some speed. Contract year. So, playing maybe a little out of his you-know-what. But, hey, I mean, who cares if you're the Minnesota Vikings? If you can get 10 sacks from this guy this season, that would be big. Number 91 for the Minnesota Vikings, Pat Jones. Cheers to you. Last but not least, I didn't pull the trigger, but I didn't do much on Saturday. I was going to play golf. I worked out, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to lay around and watch football. And the football was mainly terrible. It was a lot of really bad matchups. But I was like, whatever. It could be worse things to do. And the 4:30 slate came on. And Colorado State was like a 7.5-point underdog. You get them at like plus 250 to win. And I said, I need a little juice on this game to get me through it. And the game started, and I ended up not making the bet. And I was glad I did because Colorado State was at home. Both these two teams, it goes back to last year, just an incredible game. These teams hate each other. And I thought, this is a tough spot for Colorado, right? Maybe it just implodes here. And Deion had the boys ready. They had some freshman running back who looked like an NFL player, and they kicked their ass. So props to Primetime for keeping the squad. It could have unraveled. Absolute rough L in Nebraska. You had Shador throwing his offensive lineman under the bus. Thought there might be some chinks in the armor, but it didn't happen. And they dominated CSU. Now, it's going to get a little harder in the Big 12, but I watched a lot of that game, and it gave me hope. Like, yeah, this team, if they play like that with that much intensity and run the ball well, that they have a chance to be somewhat, relative for their standards, really successful this season. So game ball to Prime, Shador and the boys. Let's hit on a couple other things. I wanted, really quick before we dive into little hot seat, I think we're seeing a couple guys, and I'm a huge believer in this, and I've said it 100 times, and I'll probably say it 100 more, only because I can speak from experience. I think you learn so much. Let's face it. There are 2 roads that you can take when shit hits the fan in life. And the longer you live, it is inevitable you're going to have rough times, whether it be professionally or personally. People are going to pass away in your life. You're going to have rough moments in your life personally, whether it be relationships, whether it be with family. Professionally, unless you're like, I don't even know, you're going to hit bumpy roads, whether it's getting fired, whether it's a business idea not working out, whether it's a company going down, whether you fail at an idea. It's inevitable. And I think you have 2 choices when that stuff happens. It's like you either put one foot in front of the other and kind of mentally power through it, or just go into the tank. And let's face it, you're allowed to go into the tank immediately. It's called life. But some people in this world never get out of that state, and it derails their life. And I think the successful people have a characteristic. I don't know if it's necessarily innate. I think you can work on it over time to battle through. I'm going to figure this out. I'm not going to let this define my life. I've been fired a couple times. Who gives a shit? Those were the best moments looking back that have ever happened to me because I had to make a change. I had to look in the mirror. I'm sure a lot of people listening to this have had rough professional moments. And you look back and you can smile. Though at the time, it wasn't something you would want to smile about. But looking back, you're like, hell yeah. Shit, I'd go through it again. It only makes you better. And I think it happens with quarterbacks a lot. Obviously, Bryce was benched. It's going to be an opportunity for him to like kind of look in the mirror and go, do I want to let the last season and 2 games define my NFL career? Or am I going to do everything humanly possible to figure this out? And I look at 2 players right now who, let's face it, are just, it's short. It's only been 2 games. We got 15 more to go, but look poised to have really, really good seasons. Obviously, as a quarterback, you're very dependent on a couple things that are out of your control. Who's calling the plays? Because you're not calling the plays. This isn't the NBA where you just get to do whatever you want when the ball's in your hand. And what's around you? You don't pick the players. You're not in charge of free agency or the draft. So who your GM is in the front office, like, better keep your fingers crossed, are good. And Sam Darnold was not good early on in his career. Like, I won't argue that. But he played for Adam Gase. And then he played for Matt Rule, who Matt Rule is a better coach in terms of what he's good at as a college coach than Adam Gase, who I don't even think is in the NFL. But Matt Rule is a college coach and got run out of the NFL. He had Joe Brady. Like, I'm watching Joe Brady with the Bills, like, kind of knows what he's doing, and they couldn't figure it out. And then Sam Darnold got with Kyle and now with Kevin O'Connell, and he looks to be a very capable quarterback. He's always going to turn the ball over a little bit. It's going to be part of his repertoire. But his arm's really explosive. And one thing he's shown from last year with Kyle to now this year, he's actually pretty accurate, especially down the field. And some of those throws he made against the 49ers, obviously the highlight throw was the 97-yard touchdown bomb to Justin Jefferson. But I thought he made some really, really good throws on 2nd and 3rd and long in some big spots. And he just looks good. He clearly is confident, but you know what he might be? Pretty good player who just needed to be in a spot where things are productive, like the talent around him and the guys calling the plays. Now, a little bit different because unlike Sam, Sam started, I looked it up today. This is his 7th year in the NFL. He started 58 games. Derek Carr has started 100 plus more games than Sam Darnold. He's 33 years old. He started 160 games. And I think he's been a pretty polarizing player over his career because his good can look good and his bad can look really bad. But I will defend him on this. And I was in the Bay Area the majority of his college career or his NFL career. I was around him 1 year in college and then followed his college career really closely. In college, he had a pretty, I would say, stable situation, even though there was a coaching change during his tenure. Pat Hill got fired and Tim DeRuyter came in. Fresno State, still to this day, like they've had my entire adult life, they have excellent offensive skill guys. They have NFL wide receivers and NFL running backs. And they usually have a good offensive line. And then he gets to the NFL, and it's the Raiders. And in his first year, he had 2 coaches. And through his tenure there, he went through a bunch of coaches. He went through, only the Raiders could pull this off. Like, we're going to move. We're moving. But we need to stay in this stadium and in where we live right now for another couple of years. No one else could pull that off. The Rams didn't. They immediately moved to Los Angeles. The Chargers didn't. They immediately went up to the Home Depot. The Raiders just stayed because that's kind of the Oakland dysfunction. The A's did it literally the last couple of years. Like, we're moving. We are not going to stay here, but we're going to play here right now. That is not easy to overcome when you're the quarterback. And I watched him do it. And he handled himself because from a maturity class standpoint, like, he checks all those boxes. But I actually think he's better than people realize. His touchdown to interception ratio over the course of his career is like 2.5 to 1. He's thrown 245 touchdowns and like 105 picks. He's been a productive player. He's also relatively accurate. I wouldn't call him Drew Brees or Steve Young, but he's not an inaccurate player. The reason I like the Saints this year, one, he has so much experience. There's nothing in the NFL he hasn't seen. Well, he hasn't seen past the first round of the playoffs, but he's been to the playoffs a couple times. And for the most of his career, he's played on the Raiders, who never go to the playoffs. So last year with the Saints, like, everyone acted like they sucked. It's like, guys, They weren't as bad as you thought. They're not a 4 or 5. They won 9 games. And for half the season, the offense was a joke. So you get Kubiak, who I didn't realize was going to be this good. But I know that offense works because everyone around the league that runs it is successful. And Derek is going to be successful in this offense. And they have skill guys around him. And they invest in the offensive line right away. And their defense is good. So am I shocked that they are dominating as much as they have? Of course I am. But I thought they'd be an 11-win team for a reason. I thought this offense was going to work, and I thought their defense would be good. And I don't expect their offense to sustain this level of play, but he's a pretty good player. He's pretty good. Everyone anointed Cousins over the years as this is the best second-tier quarterback. It's I don't see much difference between Derek or even Jared Goff when he's playing well. And right now he's playing well. I need to tell you about my friends at Mando. This Mando deodorant, the Mount Fuji, I've been using it every day for the last month. I go to the gym in the morning. I'm a sweater. No one wants to smell the rest of the day. Bad body odor, biggest turnoff in America. Well, here's the key. Put a little of this on, you're taken care of. Here's my favorite, though. This invisible cream deodorant I use for my balls. You just put a little pea-size amount on your finger. Boom. I play a lot of golf. Summer in Arizona. It's 120 degrees. You're sweating. No one wants to stink, especially down there. Boom. They also have these deodorant wipes. You can put them anywhere. Under armpits, down low, on your arms. You want to be smelling good. They will take care of you. Mando Starter Pack is perfect for new customers. It comes with a solid stick of deodorant, cream tube deodorant, and 2 free products of your choice, like mini body wash. I got one in the shower. Deodorant wipes, and free shipping. Luckily, I have a discount code to help you get hooked on my favorite smelling whole body deodorant on the market. New customers get $5 off a starter pack with our exclusive code. That equates to over 40% off a starter pack. Use code JOHN, JOHN, at shopmando.com. That's SHOPMANDO, shopmando.com. For those of us that are in our late 30s, you were probably in junior high and high school when Nelly came out. And Country Grammar's still one of an all-time album. I don't even think they call them albums anymore. You just go to Apple Music or whatever, or Spotify, and just listen to whatever the songs are. But in my days, there were CDs and cassettes, and they were called albums. And one of my favorite Nelly songs is Getting Hot in Here. And I think when you look around the NFL, there are 2 guys. It's a little early for hot seat, but there were guys with tangible pressure coming into the season. And it's safe to say when they walked into their office Monday morning at 0-2, it's getting hot in here. Because Brian Daboll was already being asked about his job status. And let's face it, the offseason hard knocks made everything dramatically worse. It really did. Right? The Saquon Barkley situation, the way his general manager interacted, Daboll takes back the play calling. It felt they were loyal to Daniel Jones. And I think they're in major trouble. They stink. I said this on Sunday night. Just look at the box score. I watched a decent amount of that game. I had it on my computer with 8 other games going on TV. So I had some money on Brian Robinson, so I kept watching. Every time I looked, the Commanders were driving the ball down the field. They were just terrible in the red zone. They got worked in that game. I mean, worked. So it's one thing to get your ass kicked week 1 against the Vikings. Maybe the Vikings are a 10-win team. To lose like that, the score was close, the game was not. And now their schedule, I just looked at it, is at Cleveland, which feels like a tough matchup for them given Cleveland's defense. Dallas short week, Thursday Night Football. At Seattle, Cincy, Philly, at Pitt. This thing can get ugly really fast. And I'm not acting like Daboll's the village idiot, but this thing has not gone well. And it gets back to the owner, I don't think he wants to fire these guys, but I think it's going to be very, very difficult if they win 4 games and Daniel Jones just implodes. Now, Daniel Jones ain't lasting the entire season if he plays bad, but it's not like they're bringing Kurt Warner off the bench with Tommy Cutlets. And listen, I like this guy a lot. He's been really cool to me. He is a great guy. Everyone that knows Doug Pederson loves the guy. But this is not going well. And it's not going well at all. And fair or not, the moment they gave Trevor Lawrence $200 million, if he doesn't look good, he can't get blamed immediately. Even if it turns out he's one of the most overhyped players of my life, who's not like terrible. It's not like he's Bryce Young, but he clearly isn't remotely close to like a top 6 or 7 quarterback in the NFL. And you gave him $200 million. So watching some of that Cleveland game, the highlights, I didn't watch much of it, but watching him last week, something's not right. And Trent Baalke has known to try to backstab guys over the years. Now, I don't know if he has enough juice where he could survive this one. I would imagine Shad Khan fires everybody. I mentioned this last week. The guy to keep an eye on is William Belichick. But this thing get ugly, and this thing get ugly quick. For some reason, there's a doubleheader on Monday Night Football. I don't love doubleheaders on Monday night. Like I just like to enjoy one game. But there are 2 games. And one of them happens to be the Jags at Buffalo. I don't know about you. I don't love that spot for the Jags. So all of a sudden you're 0-3 and you're going, we got problems. I think Doug is in major, major trouble. Now, unlike Daboll, I do think that they would let those guys coach all season. I could see a scenario, and I'd have to look at his staff. I'm not acting like they got reinforcements on it, but you just pay the quarterback $200 million and you're 1-7, and you get axed in the middle of the year. Okay, last but not least, it's Take Tuesday, and something that just drives me nuts. Sean McVay talked about this because in that playoff game against the Lions, he blew a bunch of timeouts in the third quarter and did not have them at the end of the game. And then when Vrabel got fired, he had this like right-hand man who was in charge of rules and kind of game management that McVay immediately hired because he's like, I have to be better where we're not blowing timeouts in the third quarter, so I have him at the end of the game. This is not college football. You're not going to see Tennessee, Kent State where it's 65-0 at halftime. All these games, even when they don't feel close, the score usually is. It's why a massive point spread in the NFL is like 7 points. That's huge. Kyle Shanahan, and I put the quarterback and the coach on the same level. Because if you are calling timeouts to save a delay of game in the third quarter, I might give you a little leeway if you're at like the 5-yard line in the red zone because scoring a touchdown is a big deal. But if you're at the middle of the field or back, I'd even say like 30-yard line and back, that cannot happen. And it is not allowed. And even if your quarterback does it, because in the 49er game, Purdy does that, I put that on the head coach. Because the head coach is in charge of everything. You can go over these situations all offseason, all training camp, and during the week. Under no circumstances, if we get down close to 0, in the third quarter, are we blowing a timeout? And I said this yesterday on the old X channel because I was watching games and it was driving me nuts. If I was an owner, I would say this. If you call a timeout in the third quarter on a delay game, I am fining you as a head coach, or your quarterback does, $100,000. And if that timeout that you called on that drive, you end up punting, I'm doubling it. It cannot happen because in the Niner game, at the end, they didn't have any timeouts because they're blowing them in the third quarter. I'm sorry. Like, I don't pretend to be Warren Sharp here and some genius with analytics, but it's pretty black and white that it is not worth the 5-yard penalty in the middle of the third quarter to not have a timeout in the end of the game. Even if you're down, because it's inevitable, you're going to be in a one-score situation. Like 90% of NFL games find themselves in that situation. So I just do not understand with the data we have, with how much we have talked about this specific instance, not having timeouts at the end of the game because you're using them for delay of games to avoid them with 6 minutes left to go in the third quarter. So instead of being second 11, it's second and 16. Who cares? I'm sorry. It is not, the juice isn't worth the squeeze on that one. And if I was an owner, I would have a stern talk. I think there are probably rules. You can't fine them $100,000, but it's like, this is unacceptable. Don't want you to ever do that. It is not worth it. Again, maybe you can justify it if you're at like the goal line or within the 5-yard line. I'd even give you maybe the 10, but not when you have 70 yards to go. That's just bad ball.